Hello, hello. I know you all love being together, those in the room, and hello to the Zoomosphere is here. But if everybody could quiet down a little bit, we we tried to give everybody a buffer of a few minutes because we knew food was coming out and people would need to chew a little bit. But if you could all be as quiet as you could from this point, because we're trying to maintain the decorum of the plenum and also minimize the ambient noise that's going to go out to our folks out in the Zoomosphere. So welcome everybody to our first quasi-live plenum meeting now in nearly 4 years. It's wonderful to see you all here and to actually be able to break some bread with the other members of the plenum. So to begin, I'll ask if Rabbi Maurice will give us the blessings.
Greetings. I want to offer a Shehechianu. There it is. I think most of you probably know the words, this blessing, giving thanks for this opportunity to gather in this unique way that hopefully is bringing us on the path towards growing closer and closer together in person and online. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ruach haolam shehecheyanu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. And an additional bracha for the sacredness of gathering together in community. And if you know the words, join me. If you don't, join me in spirit. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ruach haolam asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'tzorchei tzibur. We give praises to the Eternal One, the source of life and community, who's given us the mitzvah of caring for the needs of the community.
Well, welcome everybody. It is just so wonderful to see real live people here in the room and to see all of our friends from around the country and potentially the world on the screen there, and to all be able to come, and to all be here together. And especially for our virtual attendees, our Zoom attendees, think about what a wonderful thing this is, because were it not for the technology, many of you probably couldn't be a part of this today. And so we were all sharing in this together, and I hope out there in the Zoomosphere you can feel some of the warmth that's in this room, because it is really just remarkable, but we're radiating it all out there to all of you wherever you may be. So this is the first true hybrid meeting of the plenum. When we had the last convention, I think we had about 6 members or 7 members of the plenum who were on some brand newfangled thing called Zoom. And if those of you who participated in it, you may recall we had quite a number of technological glitches trying to pull that off. It's a little bit, I think, like airplane pilots. They talk in terms of hours of experience. So when we had the last meeting, I think we had about 20 hours of Zoom experience each. At this point, 3.5 years later, 5,000 hours of experience, flying experience. So hopefully we'll get it better at this point. But a couple of ground rules to remind everybody: we want this to be an interactive meeting. We welcome comments and suggestions. And to manage between the two fora, the live and on screen, everybody be respectful of everybody else. That's one of our ground rules for the convention. We'll try to balance comments coming from the live group and the Zoom group. And it's very important for the Zoom group that when you want to speak up or ask a question, you physically raise a hand or virtually raise a hand. So I hope you all know where the reaction button is at the bottom of your screen. You can raise the virtual hand. That's the best way to get attention. Otherwise, just gesture wildly, but you will be muted. So before you can speak up, our tech folks here have to unmute you, and you've got to raise your hand so we can bring you in. And last, we have a lot to cover today, so I won't speak long. I just want to give a special thanks to everybody who's made this convention possible. It's been an extraordinary event, taken a tremendous amount of work, and to those who've made this meeting possible, and especially our Plenum Steering Committee, who have been working so hard behind the scenes to put this together, as they've been putting together all of our meetings for the past several years. So thank you all, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Deborah Waxman.
My bag. Oh, my bag. And I lost it. Hi. Hi. It's so amazing to be with all of you in person. It's so exciting to be with all of you online. I'm going to look at you because that's how you see me, but it's just thrilling when we look at this screen and to see that you're participating. Thank you for making it a priority. Thank you, all of you. You guys are you're the heart of what we're trying to do. Like we are gathered together to to sing and to learn and to be nourished and to talk about issues of substance in learning ways and in governing ways. So thank you so much for your thoughtfulness, your representation of your congregations, your understanding of the larger whole, and for helping us to ensure that the Reconstructionist movement is vital and thoughtful and representative and creative at all times. I'm going to take advantage of this hybrid. I'm so happy to be in the room with all of you, and then I'm going to actually disappear and go into my room and join online with all of you. So that's part of this weird new hybrid world that we're in, and thanks for helping us to figure out this weird new hybrid world that is also full of really wonderful and rich opportunities. Thank you.
I'll tell you.
Okay. Okay, I won't do it. Okay, hi everybody. And hello everybody out there. I'm Seth Rosen. This is how tall I am. So as Deborah said, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be with all of you. I'm grateful to everybody on the screen. And I wanted to take a minute of framing, and I'm only going to take a minute because you have time, and context. And some of this is in some written materials that I think Micah sent around, but I wanted to share it. So the process we're starting today with the report of the Tikkun Olam Commission is actually the first full expression of the governance structure that we put into place, first full expression I've seen of the governance structure that we put into place 6 years ago for to create a structure in which the movement could speak. And what is the movement? I think today is a really perfect illustration of what the movement is, and that structure is a perfect illustration. So it's kind of a three-legged stool, right? There is Reconstructing Judaism, the organization that I'm the chair of the board of, that Deborah is the president of, that is a central organization that serves the interests of the congregations and serves the interests of the rabbis and seeks to promote Reconstructionism and our movement. There is the RRA, the Organization of the Rabbis, the second leg of the stool. And there is the plenum of the congregations and the congregations they represent, which is the third it's like the bill becomes a law. It's the third co-equal in every way, in this particular instance, in other ways superior, leg of the stool. What our governance principles say, so the question is, how do we make a statement of policy and belief for the movement, for this collection of three different, linked but separate bodies? What our rules say is that the primary body vested with the responsibility for formulating policy statements for the movement, for the Reconstructionist movement, is the Tikkun Olam Commission. That is the role of the Tikkun Olam Commission to develop statements of policy that they would like the movement, these three legs, to consider, and present them. So the rules say once they have produced a statement of policy or principle that they would like us to consider, they then present that to those three bodies, to the Board of Reconstructing Judaism, to the Plenum, and to the RRA. And a position does not become a position of the movement until it has been approved by those three bodies, acting independently. And there can be back and forth to the extent it's necessary. So we have approved policy statements since we merged, but this is the first that has come up in the way that was actually contemplated by the governance principles. So our Tikkun Olam Commission has spent a little more than a year, developing a draft statement that it is now, beginning today, going to present to the plenum, to the board, to the RRA, for all of us to consider as separate bodies. It is the role of each of us to figure out what work we need to do in order to act on their recommendation. They are not, in sort of a cosmic way, the Plenum Commission is not a branch of Reconstructing Judaism. It is made up of people who were appointed by the plenum and people who were appointed by the RRA, and sort of exists outside the three-legged stool. I don't know, the metaphor just blew up. So that's what I think it's really exciting. I think this is a chance for us to see how this works. For those of us, those people who were around in the JRF days, when there was JRF and RRC and the RRA, this was an attempt to replicate the way things happened then. There were commissions, they made recommendations, they were considered by the plenum and the RRA, and they needed to be approved by those bodies in order to become statements of policy. So the theoretical becomes real. I'm very excited. The board got this statement for the first time on Tuesday? Tuesday. And I know you all will, we will get the statement. You've had an opportunity to see it outside. We'll give it to you all today. Our board is working on how we're going to process it. I hope that you guys and the Plenum Steering Committee will work on how you will process it. The RRA, which has already approved a very similar statement, will process it one way or another. And we will take the time that it needs for the movement to speak in a voice that emerges from this process. So I'm grateful for you if you're engaging that. I'm really interested to see how it goes. Please approach this like in the way I described it, which is we're all figuring this out for the first time. So thank you all for your service, for your attention, for the careful deliberation we're about to begin. And thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Seth. So now, before we dig into the real serious stuff, it's time for at least a little bit of fun. So we're going to talk about each other and learn a little bit more about our communities for a few minutes with a little show and tell. And so I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Maurice to introduce our show and tell presenters.
So the request that went out was if there were congregations that had really awesome printed resources that were shareable, either as they are or as concepts that fellow congregations might be interested in modifying or replicating. And we have a short video from Rabbi Barbara Pensner from Temple Hillel B'nai Torah in West Roxbury. And then Molly Jacobs is here from Agudas Achim in Attleboro, Massachusetts. And these are two quick show and tells. And if you're interested in obtaining these resources or their templates, reach out to me. I will make the connections happen.
We apologize. We did have a technical problem, and we're going to attempt to replay the video with the sound broadcast out to the Zoomosphere. Folks on Zoom, in a moment when it starts playing again, if you can hear the sound, wave your hands, put your thumbs up, or let us know. Well, we are all gathered here today to learn together, and we're still learning our technology. That much is clear. So, without further ado, Molly, live and in person.
Hello. Good afternoon. So I come from Rhode Island, Massachusetts, congregation Agudas Achim. And we are, during the pandemic, our education committee decided that we wanted to have something that we could share with our congregation for times when we are not in person, as a reminder to our families, to our congregation, for the blessings and the things that we take for granted when we are together, and that when you're home alone with your family or in whatever situation, maybe you need some reminders. And so we wanted to create something that we could have available to our families. And we ended up preparing this. It's called The Keys to Your Jewish Home. And it is a multi-page, laminated, color-coded keys to your Jewish home, blessings, prayers, ways that your family can participate in the holidays together, suggestions in Hebrew, transliterated and translated, and just a plethora of information in here. And it is color-coded, like I said, by holiday, and it just is on a little key ring, so it's really easy, laminated, goes through Shabbat and Sukkot and the high holidays, and it goes through the Jewish calendar year. Give some credit to Rabbi Elise, who was with us for 13 years. She was the brainchild behind this many years ago, and a congregant who was with her and is still there now decided, she's also on our education committee, and she decided, let's do this. Let's create another sense of connection. And we just had it available in a bin outside of our temple. We emailed out to the Hebrew school, to the congregation, if this is something that you find helpful, come by and pick one up. And it was just available in a plastic bin under a covered part of our temple property. And it's been great. It's been great to have it. And I think people are using it. I think they're enjoying it. And if they were taken. And I think that's basically it. Oh, I remember one other detail regarding fees or processing of all of this. There is a PDF that Rabbi Harris has. If you're interested in what this looks like in terms of content and in terms of what it's all about, he can send it to you. He may CC me, so I'll be aware if you're interested. And I just recommend that you take a look at it. You decide to, I like the idea that we color-coded it by holiday, and lamination goes such a long distance. We ended up, the congregant who put a lot of legwork into revamping this, she donated it. She went through all the processing and all the money that went into printing these and laminating them, not cheap. It was her donation. It was a really lovely thing for her to do. So, just another idea. So thank you all.
Well, thank you, Molly. And it's interesting how the both show and tells we've had at today's meeting have been, well, we're talking about tech, just some old-fashioned physical product that enables us to bring ourselves together. It's always worth remembering how effective those things can be. Now, to get to the serious business of the meeting, I'd like to introduce Rabbi Michael Weiss to talk about the outstanding work of the Tikkun Olam Commission.
A little housekeeping here. First of all, Ed, how are we doing on time? I noticed we're not exactly on the agenda. You want to keep 30 minutes or get this shorter? 25, great. All right, next thing. Awesome. I want to also welcome the rest of my team. Rabbi Renee Bauer, the rabbinic co-chair of the Tikkun Olam Commission. Come on down, Renee. I also want to welcome B'nai Keshet's own Plenum rep, Craig Levine. Come on down, Craig. And I want to ask to invite up big on the screen the other co-chair of the Tikkun Olam Commission representing Reconstructing Judaism, Shahana McKinney-Baldwin. Welcome, Shahana. All right, we got to try to make it a little energetic here, right? All right, thanks for being with me. So I'm going to transmit. So we have goals of this presentation this time together. The first goal is to empower the plenum reps. That's you, all of you, right? To be congregational ambassadors for reparations learning, discussions, and values-based decision-making on this proposed resolution. We want to empower you. Leave here knowing that you know what your role is. You have a role, and we're going to help you get out there and do it. Second one is to clarify the process and timeline of passing a movement-wide resolution, specifically the role of the plenum. Great news. Seth already did that for me. Thanks so much. Goal 2 achieved. What a gift. Number 3, provide plenum reps a taste of study and discussion about reparations. So we're going to have a tension between 1 and 3 because everyone's going to want more study and the rabbis are going to want to talk longer about process and how this gets done. But we're going to try to do what we can. Not all. It's the ongoing machloka between myself and Rabbi Renee. So let me say a few quick things about why a resolution, and then I'll give it to Shahana to say a little bit about why this specific resolution and some of the story of how it comes to be and why that she wants you as the plenum to be holding about this Tikkun Olam Commission and the folks who are in our leadership guiding this voice. So I will say that, sorry, I'm just being on the extra cautious side because I was with the rabbis, and as an extra respect to everyone, I'm going to keep my mask on. Sorry if it's as a point of access. I am a very tall, white, short, brown-haired, very straight, business casual presenting guy with a gray shirt and some khakis on. That's who I am today. So, for a resolution, it does a lot of things. It sets both precedent for how we live out our Reconstructionist values in an ever-evolving manifestation in the public square, right? How we live as Reconstructionists, as political beings in the world. That looks like us joining coalitions, taking actions, signing on, advocating for legislation, and also about who we find ourselves doing the work of the world in, how we do tikkun olam in the world. It also creates an important historical document. Where was the Reconstructionist movement in 5782, right, in their racial justice work? What did the collective voice of the movement look like? How were they articulating these values? And it gives us a chance to learn and study Torah together, right, and do decision making to kind of study and ask one another to engage in topics and apply our values, not just for the sake of signing some onto things, but to grow and be our fullest Jewish selves as a movement together. So it's exciting, and it's a bit of labor. The Tikkun Olam Commission has already done a fair amount of that. Thank you so much, Shahana, Craig. And we're going to now be asking you and your congregation to be doing a little bit more. Shahana, I'll pass it to you to say a little bit about this particular resolution and how it came to be, if you'd like.
Thank you. I'm clicking around on my screen here. Hello, community. Hello. Can I say something? I heard a little something. It's so good to be almost with you, but to also be with you. I just want to say a little something about the backdrop of this historic moment. We are considering a reparations resolution for our movement following a few years after the reform movement, by the way, part of the backdrop. Figuring out what does such a resolution mean for our movement, and the way that we work and live as Reconstructionist Jews. Resolutions, period. It's complicated. We don't do a lot of resolutions. And Renee and I have been working to embrace the concept of Sankofa, the West African Adinkra symbol. It is a symbol of a bird with an egg in its mouth looking back. The Adinkra symbols represent ideas and proverbs. And the idea is we need to know where we've been to know where we're going. Rabbi Renee and I have been embracing this idea and reaching to learn from our past history as a movement and past resolution work that we've done. But one thing that's really, really different about this moment in history and this particular resolution is that we are following the lead of BIPOC, not just BIPOC people, not just any old BIPOC people, and BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, but BIPOC leaders in our community, in our movement, which remains an overwhelmingly white movement, and yet we've done a lot in a very short time to work to change, to work to diversify, and to work to lean into our values as a diverse community. So I encourage you to have this piece of our history in your minds as you're considering this draft document. And biachad, moving forward and leaning in, learning together. Very glad to be welcomed into this very special Plenum space today.
Biachad. Thank you, Shahana. Shkaf. All right, Renee, you're a Reconstructionist rabbi. Tell us a little bit about how we do values-based decision-making in our congregations, what they need to know as plenum reps for their communities.
Okay, great. So values-based decision-making is one of our, prize things we do as Reconstructionists. And so the first thing I want to start with is that when I try and describe the difference between the movements, one thing I always say about our movement is authority is based in the community versus the individual or the rabbi. So I think that's really important, and I just want us to really take note of that, to hold on to it, and to feel empowered by it, because in a world of increasing individualism, I used to say this before the pandemic, and now it's just worse, we really stand under the banner of community and community decision-making. So the really wonderful thing about community decision-making is that different people get heard, that the process is grassroots and not hierarchical or individualistic. The challenging part is that it's slow and sometimes messy, and that when the community decides something that I wouldn't decide myself, I've bought into an idea that I'm part of that community. So that's the groundwork of community-based decision-making, and I think really important for the 21st century in the United States. And how we do it is we study. The past has a vote, but not a veto. So we study Jewish texts and Jewish sources of the past, and we root ourselves in that. And then we look at contemporary ideas, realities, and try and put those together. And after studying and learning, then we make decisions as communities, both as individual congregational communities and then as a larger group here. And so I just invite you to embrace this resolution in that process as we come back, hopefully, for a while, in a real way, as communities in person, to really do this work together and think of it as a moment of practicing community-based decision-making, practicing community building in a really tachlis way. So I want to move on to the resolution itself and hand the mic to Craig.
I'll take a quick interlude. Yeah, I want to get Craig in here. Yasher koach. So we want to give you a taste of that learning that we're asking you to help facilitate in your in congregations. Just so you know, you're not on your own. You don't have to single-handedly decide how to teach about this whole topic of reparations to your congregations. We're currently piloting 2 Reconstructionist curricula. One is from our Day of Learning in August. Another came from anyone from JCA here? Amherst folk? Came from the Tikkun Olam committee at Jewish Community of Amherst, called The Stolen Beam. It's beautiful. We're going to be providing you adult education opportunities for your communities to help give you that Torah foundation for this process. And you get this role of representing your community through this in the plenum in this vote. And you're also Talmidim, you're also students who get to study and learn yourselves. So I have a question about how we're going to use our remaining 15 minutes of study today, which is we gave you, Shahana and Renee curated a selection of Divrei Torah, of articles that were building kind of a Torah moral case for reparations, as well as Seth's framework of kind of the process of this and the Reconstructionist kind of framing of this, as well as Ta-Nehisi Coates making also a moral case for reparations from a more secular approach. Did enough folks do the reading? It's not a test. It's about, is there enough Torah shared to go into our discussion now, or do you need some more Torah right now? And folks, you can put in the chat, need more Torah or want to talk about articles? Who is like, I want to just talk about those articles right now. I'm ready to go. Raise your hand. All right. You had to spend some time. And who's like, I want some more Torah right now to chew on? All right, more Torah, more Torah, more Torah. Okay. So it's tricky. Great. Did not get to the readings of advance. Great. It's no judges. We just want to give you a chance to do some learning here. All right. So here's what I'm going to do. We plan to give these at the end, but we're going to ask you to make small groups of about 4 here in person. Jacob, I'm going to ask you to do breakout groups. And if possible, in the folder that Maurice has, there is the actual text of the resolution. And you can start studying this as a text. The board set an awesome precedent of saying, you know what, before getting into, this was Seth's idea, I think, maybe, the nitty gritty, right? Let's hear Torah, right? The Jewish case. And so that's where we started today. But this is also becoming evolving Torah. So Craig, can you pick 4 sections for us?
Yes.
Okay, from the resolution. To give us a little taste.
I'll say with completely false bravado. Okay, the document's divided about 2/3 background whereas clauses, and then a series of resolved clauses. I'll read maybe 2 or 3 of the first and maybe 1 or 2 of the second. And I'll be skipping around a bit, so the context might feel a bit odd.
Craig was in the working group. He worked so many hours in this resolution. He knows it by heart.
With multiple other people. Whereas indigenous people populated North America for many thousands of years prior to the arrival of Europeans in the 15th and 16th centuries. And as European powers conquered and colonized North America, they displaced, enslaved, and slaughtered the native populations. And from its inception, the United States, like so many countries built on a foundation of European colonization, continued to tyrannize and exterminate native peoples as it sought to expand its territory across the continent. Jumping down, whereas those considered white in the United States, including in recent years many Jews, have benefited from certain rights and privileges with respect to health, safety, property, education, employment, wealth creation, and social and political participation, which were made possible as a direct result of policies and systems that oppressed Black, Indigenous, and people of color BIPOC populations, whether or not those considered white directly participated in or approved of this oppression. Whereas healing and reconciliation cannot begin without confronting the truth of the United States history, and it is long past time to acknowledge and address the multiple and incalculable harms penetrated against BIPOC communities through colonization, slavery, oppression, and white supremacist practices. Finally, the final whereas. Whereas our sacred texts command us to pursue justice and to love our neighbors as we love ourselves, and we are specifically commanded to make restitution as when the foundation of a house is built with a stolen beam, we acknowledge that the stolen land, resources, and labor of people forced to work without compensation necessitates restitution, and while it is not incumbent upon us to complete the work of perfecting the world, neither are we at liberty to desist from it. Now, therefore, be it resolved as follows, again selectively, that in our commitment to work for a national reckoning in the United States through reparations, we collectively acknowledge the harm that has been done to BIPOC communities and the ways that current American prosperity is largely the result of a system built on oppression and white supremacy. Jumping down, resolved that informed by and working in solidarity with impacted communities, we call for all Reconstructionist movement congregations and affiliated groups to engage in deep reflection on the ways in which we have participated in or benefited from racial injustices in our communities, and to answer the call of Torah to pursue justice and practice tshuva by taking concrete steps to repair the harm. And finally resolved that this document should not be and shall not be the last communal self-assessment, reflection, or call to pursue reparations for the injustices and structural inequities resulting from European colonialism and white supremacy.
Thank you, Craig. So you have a little Torah. You have the draft the Tikkun Olam Commission is bringing to you saying, this is going to be a movement-wide voice. We want to hear from you at convention. And I want to say, in case you haven't noticed, we have an interactive way you can do that. In the hallway, we have the text of the resolution, and you can put up sticky notes to these 3 questions. What excites you? What challenges you? And what do you want to learn more about that the Tikkun Olam Commission can take back into consideration, having more voices to be a part of this process? But now, you're going to make groups of about 3 or 4. There's no such thing as a bad group. The smaller, the more you get to talk, okay? and you're going to take 13 minutes to talk either about what the taste you got now or the Torah you got to learn before this on these 3 questions, and make some notes to yourself so you can go put them in the hallway later, okay?
And it's helpful for us to know what you think, but also what you think will come up in your community. So, oh gosh, my community would be really challenged by X, or so. Both you as people and you as representatives. Thank you.
All right. Joy. Yeah, sorry. We're going to do it on Zoom? Sorry. Thank you, Jacob. On Zoom, we're going to go into breakouts of 3 or 4. You have the file in the chat. Yes, Shahana? Yes. How about before you go into breakouts, we'll turn off the sound here. She is speaking. She's speaking.
Post-it process.
She's speaking to them, though.
Have somebody
Yeah.
And I just want to sign up randomly. No, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. Should I just open all rooms now or wait for her to stop speaking? Now? She's still speaking. I don't know what she's done. Okay. Or is she facilitating her own discussion on there? Oh, okay.
Thank you for all the last minute. Thanks.
Well done. Keep it going. Sorry. I know, it looks like she's still. No, it's running through the balance. I think we're okay, but yeah, so. Thank you. Good to see you. No. Is there a time frame? Like Ready for breakout. Okay. So is there a time frame that they need the Post-its by?
I don't know.
Oh, wait, she's still talking, so I'm not sure. She's showing.
She's
Okay,
probably
fine.
calling to see her on the phone.
It's okay, you can leave it.
Okay, all right. I wanted to make sure that's
Everybody should have their own job.
That is what people who are. Actually, the people in the breakout rooms Shahana during the They pick up the cubes.
All right. I'm okay. This is like this particular block is the one to the time stuff because it's the one where I can't literally run around to other rooms and stuff. So, so there's a transition that's between large groups and workshops that's happening soon at 2 p.m. I think. So just trying to make sure everybody else is ready. How much breakouts do the time do the breakouts have?
I don't know. I think that we're going to have to.
How much time should I? 4 more minutes.
All right, you have about 4 more minutes. If you feel like that's not enough time, you're right. We want to leave you with wanting more. And I'm sorry that I didn't give you the update for this morning's breakfast where they decided they really wanted to read the resolution because they were like, no one's going to read it. So,
Actually, I think more people did than I expected.
they got a little bit of both.
Yeah. That is what's the
Our best attempt at the ability, the idea of the taste.
Yeah. No, I can do that. Yeah.
And I should say also, I don't know if it's the RRA
All right. All right, folks. This is, yeah. You can stop now. Yeah. Okay, folks. Folks, this is the thing I like least about as a rabbi, asking people to stop studying Torah. I hate this, I hate this, I hate this. And kavod le'ed. We have more of an agenda to get through. If this left you wanting more, if you're like, I want to pick up that conversation, invite someone for a seltzer, invite them for a drink tonight, come by the Tikkun Olam Commission's table. We will be in touch. We will be providing you learning opportunities. And I'm going to give it to Craig to leave you with a final charge.
So this was largely, as Micah said, already wrapped by Seth, but I just want to say two things quickly. So going forward, what's going to happen? 2 steps, 3 bodies. The 3 bodies are the rabbis, the board, and you, the congregations, the plenum, and that's the wrong pronoun. We. I am a plenum rep. And in fact, I'll speak from that perspective in a moment. So those 3 bodies, and because the RRA adopted an analogous resolution on the same subject at least a year, if not 2 years ago, my strong suspicion is that in the RRA, consideration of this will result in approval quickly and by close to acclamation. And the real processes will go on at the board level and in the plenum and at the congregations in 2 phases. You'll get something as a plenum rep in writing that will detail the how and the time frame, but the 2 phases are basically bring this to your community, work it, study it, and feed it back to us on the commission. I guarantee you every comment, question, critique or praise will be assiduously considered by us. We have done that. Our task force, as it relates to feedback preliminarily from the board, from our colleagues on the commission, we take this extremely seriously and are very grateful for every ounce of feedback. We will do that, then circulate a final resolution for vote by the board, by the RRA, and by the plenum. I am the sort of person who would like all of that to occur by Tuesday. Of course, it's not going to happen. I will say that I think reconstructionist processes are typically unduly prolonged, and particularly given the fact that what I think will be adoption of this will be the beginning of the work, not the end. This should be the work of months, not years, from my humble perspective. So speaking finally as a plenum rep, for those of you who have not been in that role terribly long, by virtue, I'm ashamed to say, of no one having stepped up to succeed me, I've been in role at my shul for a long time. And so how I take this up, something comes from the movement and I'm charged to feed back, is entirely contextual. Sometimes I speak to the presidents and the rabbis, sometimes the board, sometimes a particular committee. In one case, our movement's consideration of the admittance and ordination of rabbis in multi-faith marriages. We convened a congregational meeting on the subject. This will depend on the culture of your shul. At B'nai Keshed, we'll do some teachings, we'll work at the board, we'll work with the rabbis, we'll work it through, and I'll get to the point where I can represent the gestalt of the congregation in good faith when the plenum vote comes around.
Yashar Koach. To the whole Tikkun Olam Commission, just a fantastic job. I just said to Seth a moment ago, we could spend hours discussing this topic. And remember, we're all together for another couple days, so please do. Take advantage of your time.
Shahana and Renee are going to go. Have a great rest of your meeting. I'll see you in the halls.
Thank you again. So Craig's mention of a vote actually is a perfect segue here. You may note that we did not have any voting items on the agenda for this meeting. That's basically because this meeting is about 6 weeks early. We normally have our spring meeting at the end of April, beginning of May. So we will have a couple of voting items coming up in the spring, specifically for the new membership of the Tikkun Olam Commission and the Joint Israel Commission. So to take care of that voting business, we're going to plan on holding a special plenum meeting in early June. Now, I know how much everybody loves giving up Sunday afternoons in June, so we're going to repeat something we did about 18 months ago. We'll have a special meeting on a weekday evening. It'll be very short. We'll probably schedule it for 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific. to take care of those voting items, and if something else comes up in between, as probably will, we'll add them to the agenda. But the objective will be to keep that special meeting very, very short, so it's either after dinner or before dinner or whatever, and it doesn't ruin anybody's Sunday afternoon in June. With that, Rabbi Maurice is going to give us an update on the Rabbinic Placement Commission.
Actually, I want to invite Chaim Herzig Marks and anyone else who may be accompanying Chaim in speaking a little bit about this. Chaim has joined us, so I invite you to unmute yourself and call on him and possibly Tressa as well. Okay.
Hi, everybody. So I haven't been to a Plenum meeting in a really long time. I hope you're enjoying the work that you do. So here's your briefing on the Joint Placement Commission. We are a new commission. We are almost ready to start working. We lack just one more member to round up the full complement of people who will be participating in the plenum. And let me kind of outline what our mandate is and where the impetus comes from, and then a little bit about the structure and how we're planning to proceed. So I see Rabbi Deborah Waxman in the room. So if I see a scowl go across her face, I will know that I've said something not quite right. So the commission, of course, is a joint creature of the RJ and the RRA, and we were given a quite broad and non-specific mandate to examine really soup to nuts, end to end, every aspect of the rabbinic placement process. And the expectation, of course, then is that we will make recommendations where recommendations are needed. We will create documents or commission documents to be created where they are needed. My personal expectation is that we'll rewrite the placement guidelines for affiliates, that we will write placement guidelines for rabbis, that we are likely to write placement guidelines for non-congregational potential employers. We certainly will need to figure out how to coordinate with other denominational seminaries, and we may need to figure out how to coordinate with non-denominational seminaries. We have, as I say, a very very broad charter. The only specific work products that we have been requested to produce are, as soon as practicable, a job description for the permanent placement director and a proposed structure and budget for the placement office. Aside from that, pretty much everything else we think we need to do, we will bring up to our sponsors and the bodies to which we report, which are the RJ board, I guess, and the RA executive committee. We'll bring those up as they come. So why are we doing this? Apart from the fact that a really long time has expired between when the first placement guidelines were written and now, a lot has changed in the employment landscape for rabbis. So if you think about it, or if you happen to know, something on the order of a third of RA members are actually employed in pulpits, and that includes both RJ pulpits and non-RJ pulpits. So 2/3 of the members of the Construction Clinical Association don't even work in congregations. Secondly, there have arisen in recent years many non-denominational seminaries, and so the graduates of those seminaries compete with our RA members for positions. And we need better to understand how to position ourselves and our rabbis against rabbis who have received smicha from non-denominational seminaries. Hang on one second, I lost my notes. I don't want to miss anything. Okay, I'm back. So, as every industry has, we've experienced disintermediation through internet websites. Any congregation that wants to can post a position in any one of hundreds and hundreds of websites, and people and rabbis will see them. And this, poses a problem which I will call quality control, because once once hiring is happening through nameless and faceless job sites, you don't really know what you're getting. So one of the benefits that our placement office can bring is a real understanding of who our graduates are, who our A members are, I should say. I should not say graduates. And the value that they can bring, which is something that you simply can't get. But again, we need to figure out how to position this in the marketplace. The fourth item I would mention is that in recent years, an increasing number of College of RSC graduates have expressed an entrepreneurial interest in establishing a rabbinate in a non-traditional way. And we frankly don't know how to support them, but it's part of our mission to figure out how to support them in their quest for meaningful work. And then finally, the movement, as you know, has committed itself to racial diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that alone is sufficient reason to completely reevaluate our placement processes to make sure that they comply. I saw something pop up in the chat, and I'm happy to address. Yes. Will congregations who have experienced the placement office in recent years be asked to offer input or feedback? So the answer to that is yes, and that is going to happen primarily, I think, through membership on the commission. So it's just kind of moving ahead. The commission has two co-chairs. I am one, and Rabbi Marco Penster is the RRA co-chair, and we are staffed by Rabbi Elliot Skidal. There will, when the commission is fully populated, be 4 RJ members, and there will be 4 RRA members. And they will be broadly, actually we have 7 out of the 8 positions already filled. We lack only 1 RRA representative. And they have been taken broadly from congregations, non-congregations, recently filled congregational positions, aspiring congregational positions, rabbis who are serving within the movement, rabbis who are serving outside the movement. In addition, we expect to engage with many, many constituencies, as frankly as many as we can fit into what I hope would be a realistic schedule. And so we're quite consciously looking for information because we don't know what the answer is. We know what a lot of the questions are, but we don't know what many of the answers are. And then the last thing I will say is that we intend to bring our Reconstructionist values to this work. And many of the values, of course, you're all familiar with: Kavanah, B'Tselem Elohim, Machloket L'Shem Shemayim, L'Shon Hara. But we have a set of additional values that are very important to us that I want to make you aware of. And the first one is this: that people who enter the rabbinate do so because they are seeking to engage in work that they find holy. And given that it is crucial that those who hire rabbis also view the work for which the rabbi is being hired as holy. Our shorthand for this is Brit Kodesh, a holy covenant for the sake of doing work for the community. So second, I'm going to paraphrase very slightly from one of our seminal documents. RJ and the RRA have a shared interest in supporting RRA members in finding meaningful, valuable work that is generative, sustainable, and supportive of Jewish growth and vibrancy wherever that may be. So we're in this together, right? RJ and RRA are
All right, Ed, any hands?
We're going to switch it to gallery view. Craig has a question.
Okay,
Someone can bring him in.
one moment, time.
Thank you very much. It sounds like timely and really important work. And I ask a question on a background of complete ignorance. And the question is, how does our movement handle rabbinic openings? In the following context, I was surprised to learn recently, even relatively recently, that the shul I grew up in, where my parents are still members, is conservative. And if you have a rabbinic opening, you may only go to the movement, and the movement will only send you people they approve. You can't advertise widely. They will literally kick you out of the movement or threaten to do so if you attempt to hire a rabbi outside their process. What is our current state of affairs as regards that process?
Chaim, do you want to answer that, or you want me to answer it?
Well, actually, if you'd like to, that'd be fine with me, because it's only slightly equipped.
Okay. How do we answer? Uh-oh. Where should I stand? Okay. The way that we handle placement right now is that a Reconstructionist congregation lets our placement office know, Rabbi Elliot Skidell is currently the placement director, that they are looking for, that they're going to be in the search process. And we ask that our congregations place first with us, right? That is a part of what their responsibility is for being a Reconstructionist affiliate. It's both a responsibility and a service that we offer, right? Because part of what it means to go through our movement is that we are offering our congregations rabbis who we know are in accordance with our ethics code, who are working within our system, and who we believe will be a good fit for our congregations. We also make it possible, as time goes on, the obligation of the congregation in placement is that they must first consider candidates who come from us. If they find that the candidates who come from us are, for whatever reason, not a fit, then we give permission, we authorize the congregation to look elsewhere. And what we do is we open that up to the other movements, and we have an agreement with the Reform movement and the Conservative movement, and we hope that our congregations are working with other seminaries whose authority we recognize, right? This is one of the questions that we've been talking about for the new placement commission is whether and how new online seminaries that have been proliferating, how do we address that? What happens if, right? And the current situation with the Reform movement and the Conservative movement, and many of you may have seen that, is that in this current climate, in this current market, there are insufficient numbers of rabbis to fill the positions that are open. So the placement world is changing, right? The placement world is really changing now. And that's why we need to be asking these questions at this moment, is to figure out, okay, what are we going to do in this new moment? That system has worked well for many, many years, and it's also changing. When the Purple Book was written in 2000, people weren't looking for jobs on the internet. That wasn't even an option, right? So now people are looking for jobs on the internet. What do we do with that? That's a whole new ballgame.
Thank you, Teresa. Any other questions? Well, fantastic. Thanks so much, Chaim. We appreciate the presentation and look forward to the great work of the new commission. One quick housekeeping detail, another thing we're learning about the hybrid format. Those of us here live can't monitor the chat very effectively. So after the session is over, we will review the recording of the chat and respond as need be. But understand, if we're not responding to your questions right now, it's because we can't see them as they flash by. But one question we did see, a very good question, is the timing on the feedback on the reparations resolution. The goal is to, if possible, pass a resolution in the fall. And that means for the board and for this body and for the RRA. For this body, we will need to have a final resolution proposed more than 30 days before our fall meeting, which usually happens sometime in the latter part of November, early December. It's not scheduled yet. The board has a somewhat earlier schedule that it needs to move on. So what that's saying in a very Reconstructionist way is as soon as you can after full deliberative process, but it would be a great goal to view, I think, by early summer is the time to try to get the thoughts together from your community and provide feedback. Question?
So the resolution that was handed out today, when is that going to be emailed to us?
The question was, when will the resolution that was handed out to this room today be emailed to all of us?
Which would make it easier to share with our congregation.
Yes, of course. I'm sure that's part of the process. I'm guessing that Michael was waiting for this meeting before it goes out, and I assume that it will come out afterwards, but
I think Micah's intent, as soon as it's practical, like 2 weeks at the outside, he wants to put it in the context of some background materials, et cetera. He's been working like
for the Zoom room, we're saying as soon as possible is what Craig Levine is saying.
Yeah. Yeah, so just to repeat what Craig was saying is he thinks Micah wants to get it out within roughly about 2 weeks, and there may be some additional communications with it, but it'll be very shortly. Okay, well, thank you all. Now for our last substantive topic. One of the great joys of working with the Plenum is I get to work with the Thriving Community staff, and that means I get to work with, of course, Rabbi Maurice Harris and Dr. Tressa Grauer, which is a real pleasure. So with that in mind, I'd like to welcome Tressa, and Maurice is going to supplement on presenting about the Thriving Communities Department.
Okay, hi all. You've heard from me already. We've got 5 minutes, right? I can do this in 5 minutes. So you've heard a lot from members of my team already, right? You've heard Micah and Maurice. I'm going to just call out Jacob right here, who's been running around behind the scenes for this whole convention, just doing everything, and that's the case, for all of the work that we do. So it's been just 3 months since I last spoke to to this plenum. So, to give a report for the Thriving Communities work for the last 3 months, I would say largely it was planning this convention, right? So this report can be really short. But I will say, for those of you who are with us, either in person or online at this convention, we hope that you're engaging and learning and connecting. It's been really rich so far. I expect it will continue to be. I want to just say we have 524 people in person for either all or part of this convention. That's amazing. That's amazing. And, for this convention, for the RRA convention, for the RENA folks all together, and plus about 200 people online virtually, plus all of the services are going to be available to stream for anybody in any of our congregations who want to participate. So also just a few more words about this convention. If you want to take this information back home, we have 146 different choices for workshops and plenaries and services at this convention, 89 of which are being offered as hybrid or online. So many of those online workshops have been recorded, and with a little bit of time for us to get those cleaned up and posted, we're going to be able to make a lot of this learning available to our congregations for moving forward. And while I do not recommend that congregations run 10 hybrid services, multi-access services, programs simultaneously, as we've been doing, I do hope that the convention provides some kind of inspiration for how it can work, right? How we can do the kind of gathering that we want to do in our communities using online as one of our tools in the tool shed. Okay, aside from the logistics and the program planning that lots of our folks have been doing, lots of us are running programs in this session as well, and those materials will also be available to folks moving forward. A few words on a few things that are happening outside of convention in the last few months. We have continued our leadership calls on Zoom that we began when the pandemic began, which is to say that we've been meeting with groups of presidents and educators and executive directors, sometimes the rabbis as well, since March of 2020, at least monthly, at the beginning, weekly. Since December, we've held 2 leadership calls, one on staff transitions, another on takeaways from the Pew Report on Jewish Americans in 2020. We've also held 2 educator calls. We took off the month of March for the planning of this convention. We are going back to business as usual. In April, we have been hearing really positive things about folks being able to gather virtually in a regular way, and I think it's been really valuable for the participants. As you know, as I hope you know, the Thriving Communities team works with the leadership in all of our congregations to do just what our name says, which is to help our communities to thrive. And that looks like a lot of different things. It's the kind of resources and programming that I've just been talking about. It's also helping all of you to connect with each other, sometimes one-on-one. You know, when there are congregations that we know of that are addressing similar questions. We work to listen to what our congregations do so that we can best meet their needs. I want to give you 3 quick examples, and then I'm going to stop talking. The Joint Israel Commission sent out a survey about a month ago, a little more than a month ago, says Maurice. More than half of our congregations, 47 congregations, participated in the survey about Israel-Palestine, about ideas, needs, programs, and that has been a really valuable source of information for the Joint Israel Commission. Another example, Rabbi Sandra Lawson, our Director of Racial Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, has run a pilot program with 4 of our congregations chosen to represent geographic difference and size difference, and just to get a little bit of to learn about how this will work. She's created what she's calling an assessment tool on racial diversity, equity, and inclusion in the congregation. She's been working with those 4 congregations for the last few months, and there's a session later in the convention that she's leading with the folks who are representative of those communities to talk about what they learned, to talk about the process, and to think about how else we might do that work with other congregations. So that's something that we'll be working on as we go forward. I think I'm going to say one more thing, because I know we announced last time that we were running a movement-wide civil rights trip to Montgomery, Alabama. That is a fabulous thing. It is not going to happen in November as we planned. It is not happening in November as we planned because it turns out that the historically black colleges have a marching band convention in Montgomery on the same weekend that we were planning on going. There is no hotel space. There's no, it would have been really fun and lovely, but I don't think we can get there. So we're not using the date that we had initially set up, and we're going to reschedule it for March of 2023. But that is something that we can all look forward to as well. Okay, I'm going to stop now. Maurice, is there anything you want to add? No. Okay. Any questions?
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Tressa, for that speed report. So we are almost kind of sort of on time, and you heard about all those programs that have been set up. There's another, 10 or so happening in about 15 minutes. So I don't want to keep anybody late. Just a reminder, we will be having a special meeting in early June, date to be announced. Keep on the lookout for that. That will be a very short meeting. And then, of course, our next major meeting will be in the fall, and that date has not yet been set. Otherwise, just wonderful seeing you all here. Wonderful seeing everybody on the screen, and thank you for joining in with us today and working through this. And everybody, enjoy the rest of the programming, and I look forward to seeing you all in person for the next 2 days or on the screen for the next 2 days, as the case may be. Thank you all. Okay.